Is Lysithea autistic? Okay, I know you might think that question sounds, a little crazy, but hear me out, it'll all make sense by the end. Trust me, I swear. Alright, so, honesty time. Originally, this wasn't going to be a video, and just a headcanon, a theory that I would just post on one of the worst websites ever created, and that would be that. However, after the comments got so toxic that the mods had to lock the thread, and I got unironically depicted as the soy jack by the most illiterate Redditor, I decided to make this video to build off my original point and address some of the critiques of the original post. With all that being said, as per usual, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, especially on this video, as going by how that other thread went, there are gonna be some real stinkers. But maybe watch the whole video before you comment, since I promise you, this video is going to go in directions you don't quite expect. With all that said, let's get on with the video. Alright, so in the likely case that the public education system failed you, a brief description of autism is that it's a collection of symptoms that can increase or decrease in severity based on a spectrum. If you want a more in-depth explanation, you should probably read an actual medical journal, since you probably shouldn't be looking to me, 5 points, the 21-year-old Fire Emblem YouTuber, for deep analyses of the human brain. So, let's just talk about how this can apply to Lysithea instead. Throughout my too much time playing Three Houses, I noticed several things that I imagine only I and a couple others would notice, because in case you haven't caught on by now, I have the thing. And as a result, this has become one of the reasons why Lysithea is an incredibly important character to me, as you don't really see a lot of other characters like her in media. So without further ado, let's go through all the reasons why I think Lysithea could be autistic. A few of the most common symptoms would have to be hyperfixation, a development of repetitive habits and routines, social issues, and emotional instability or sensitivity. The first and probably most noticeable symptom Lysithea could have would have to be her hyperfixation on magic, being extremely dedicated to it to the point where she has an entire textbook memorized, much to the amazement of her fellow classmate, while also keeping a strict routine based on her habits, based on her Liani support, and having absolutely zero interest in things that she doesn't care about, as seen in her Raphael support. You can also see how she struggles socially, because on several occasions, she mistakes what people actually mean and mistakes their intent, becoming emotionally unstable, another symptom as a result. Another example of her social struggles would be overly depending on herself and not asking others for help in some instances, although usually she does come around in the end. The final thing I distinctly noticed was her extremely narrow dietary palate, explicitly disliking more meals than any other character in the game, and mostly just eating sweets, with there being an entire support chain dedicated to her love of cake. So, these are all the things that I noticed that would lead me to believe that Lysithea could be autistic. As well, they're all things I've gone through many, many times, and you can't really say about many other characters. Like this moment in the Claude support in Three Hopes. If I had a single penny for every time I got mad or had to ask somebody what they meant only for them to say it's just a joke, this wouldn't have been such a reckless financial decision. And even though we don't see her experience things like sensory issues, again, autism is on a spectrum and not everyone needs to experience every symptom. And if she only displayed 1 or 2 symptoms, I would not be making this video in the first place, since struggling socially or maybe liking something a little too much on their own don't really mean anything. It's the collection of all these traits that have led me to think this way about Lysithea, so keep that in mind as I bring up other characters in the next section. Now that we've gotten my reasoning as outlined by my original post out of the way, I'll address the most common counterpoint, that this is all obviously brought on by her childhood trauma of being experimented on and having a shortened lifespan as a result. Of course, this obviously makes sense. If only there was another character that went through literally the exact same thing that we could compare her to. Haha, wouldn't that just be so wacky? Edelgard is a character in the Fire Emblem Three Houses video game who was taken as a child to have twin crest experiments performed on her, went through the trauma of losing all of her siblings, likely has a shortened lifespan as a result, is very good socially, most of the time, is very emotionally stable, being calm and resolute in her resolve, and does not behave like an autistic person. Now you could say she's fixated on the avatar, but if we're counting that, then literally every character since Fire Emblem 12 is autistic. And you know what guys, I don't know if you agree, but Bantu just doesn't give me those vibes. So we have somebody who went through literally the exact same trauma as Lysithea, and yet only Lysithea behaves autistically. To even take this outside of Three Houses to get a larger sample size and pick another random character from the franchise that had their childhood stripped from them and lost their family, we can look at...
I am Mars. Mars Lowell, heir to the throne of Aricia.
The son of King Cornelius? You are truly he?
Nope.
While Prince Mars obviously wasn't experimented on, he still lost most of his family, had to watch his sister sacrifice herself for him, and had his childhood innocence stripped from him as he was banished to the middle of nowhere. A very traumatic thing for a child, and he still doesn't display autistic traits, nor do most of the many Fire Emblem characters that had very similar traumatic experiences. So yes, while Lysithea definitely experienced trauma as a child that would shape how she would behave in the future, that isn't mutually exclusive with her having autism, as believe it or not, autistic people can be traumatized too, and that doesn't change the fact that she behaves autistically when others who share her trauma don't. I hope this is easier for you to see after comparing her to other characters with similar traumas. Now of course there's the second most obvious thing you can say, that the authors obviously didn't intend for her to be autistic and therefore she isn't. This is where the death of the author comes in. The idea that once a work is published, it doesn't really matter what the author intended, it's up to the audience to come up with interpretations, which is what I'm doing here. To make it easier for you, here's an example from a member of my channel's community. Charles Dickens once wrote a character that had a kind of sleep apnea before the condition was even understood. So even though the author didn't intend for his character to have a condition he didn't know about, that doesn't stop them from having it. Therefore, I can claim the same thing for Lysithea. I don't care what they were cooking at IS or Koei Tecmo at the time, I just care about what I see when I play the game. A character that displays several symptoms of a real-life condition that can be read as such. Of course, there's also the counterpoint to this that was also brought up in the thread, and somebody thought was so important that they wasted real-life money on Reddit of all websites to highlight it. Occam's razor. The idea that entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity. Or to put it simply, when making a theory, you should pick the one with the fewest assumptions. Now, in a practical sense, I actually completely agree with this philosophy, because, you know, I don't exactly want the people designing airplanes to be making, you know, too many assumptions. However, in the case of Lysithea, this would mean that her trauma caused everything, and that's that. However, my only thought on this philosophy when applied to media is, wow, that is really boring. This is The Persistence of Memory, a painting you've probably seen before. Now, if I were to apply Occam's razor to derive this painting's meaning, I would just look at it and conclude that the heat of the setting sun is melting the metal of the clocks and causing them to bend, as that's really all I can get from the painting when taking it literally and making no assumptions, because the bending clocks, the beach, and the light of the sun are pretty much the only things present in the painting. But if you think about it for more than 2 whole seconds, that's probably not the meaning you would arrive at. However, while this was a perfectly fine example of the fallacy of applying Occam's razor to art, I want to take this concept to its absolute breaking point. On July 27th, 1978, Jim Davis released a Garfield comic where Garfield steals John's pipe. This is also possibly one of the most overanalyzed pieces of media in history, as there's a 1-hour video ironically analyzing it in which the host tries to use it to define the meaning of the universe, which has since gone on to inspire copypastas, other ironic interpretations, and I even have it on this mug. Now there's probably no easier piece of art to apply Occam's razor to, it's literally just a simple joke with simple and easy to understand artwork, but because it is art, others have given it meaning, whether that meaning is ironic or not, and it's certainly nothing Jim Davis ever anticipated would happen. Oh look, there's Death of the Author again. Now obviously these analyses are nonsensical and aren't meant to be taken seriously in the slightest, but I still think it's useful to analyze how reductive Occam's razor can be when you try to apply it to art. Speaking of art, Fire Emblem Three Houses, love it or hate it, is a video game and therefore art. Most people are tired of Edelgard versus Dimitri debates, but again, Three Houses is art and people can interpret and relate to that art in many different ways, and that being possible in itself is proof enough that this razor just can't be applied to art at all, as everyone's gonna have a different takeaway. So if you think Edelgard was justified, or if you find Bernadetta quirky and relatable, or if you think Ferdinand and Hubert should be a couple, or if you think that this painting is about the relativity of space and time, or if you think that Jim Davis is the funniest man on the planet, and you arrived at that conclusion based on the art that was put forth by the creator, and that was the meaning you got from it, then that's perfectly valid, and so is reading Lysithea as autistic. When I first got Fire Emblem Three Houses, I thought Raphael would be my favorite character because I thought his design was funny. This expectation was quickly proven false, as even though I picked the Golden Deer mostly because of him, it was Lysithea who ended up being my favorite due to having incredibly fun gameplay, a cool design with long pure white hair, being able to one-shot most things, while having 2 crests and a magic wand that gives her access to 5 range magic. However, later in some repeat playthroughs and reading more of her dialogue, I came to realize that I related to many of her characteristics. And no, I'm not saying that she's just like me for real, because believe it or not, I am not a magical woman that kills people, but rather a 21-year-old computer science major hunting for internship opportunities. Treyarch, please call me back. I made a whole video about the COD Zombies lore. You gotta call me back, Treyarch, please. So to answer the question I asked at the beginning, is Lysithea autistic? Well, she could be. I didn't make the game, so I can't say for sure. However, a lot of this video has been about deriving meaning from art, so here's my interpretation of Lysithea, based purely on what we see of her in the games. Lysithea is a 21-year-old autistic woman that has a lot of social and personal struggles. However, through pure dedication to her craft, becomes one of the most powerful members of her army by far, and not only just succeeds, but succeeded beyond all logic and limitations that you would expect somebody with her past to have because of her pure determination. However, she does fail and does falter from time to time because, much to her dismay, she just isn't perfect, but her friends will always be there for her and will move heaven and earth to save her, or, more simply, maybe just help her move some books sometimes. But why would I care about this so much as to make a whole video on it, even though the potential drama it could produce is annoying and probably more trouble than it's worth? Well, seeing a character like this in my favorite game series has certainly left an impact on me, and I wanted to talk about it. That's it, really. In the end, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree, because hey, this is just my interpretation, but if you do want to share your thoughts, you can always comment on the video and leave your thoughts, and you know, like and subscribe because this is the end of a YouTube video, and I have to say that. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, but most importantly, remember to have a nice day. Bye-bye.